Hey guys, Edre here, and I'm going to be doing the next video in my Depeche Mode series. Today I'm going to be reviewing their 6th studio album, Music for the Masses. Music for the Masses. Where to begin with this album? A lot of people do consider this album to be their greatest album, alongside Black Celebration, Violator, and a few others. But to me, yeah, this album is up there. It's definitely up there with one of their greatest and one of the greatest albums of all time. This album was one of the first big ones to really hit it big in the stadiums. First off, some of the big singles leading up to this album. Never Let Me Down Again was a huge hit. You have songs like Strangelove, which were also a pretty big hit, and Behind the Wheel, which was a really big dance tune for them. The aesthetic of the album kind of goes down the same vein as, say, Black Celebration, but with a more live-friendly, a more accessible sound. Where Black Celebration has that dark sound, it's much more, I don't like using the word experimental in every review, but they're a lot less live-friendly. Like, some of those songs, they needed to be reworked in order to be used live. On Music for the Masses, most of these songs are ready to go. In the infamous Depeche Mode 101 concert, many songs from Music for the Masses are played on this concert, and they aren't that different. Sacred is one of my favorite ones. I love the way that song, right from the start, is already suitable to be played live. Never Let Me Down Again, that's an obvious one. Behind the Wheel is a really good one, and it was a big one for the dance side of them, which is very impressive. Now, you see, I like to always talk about the track list on these albums, and this is one of the most flawless track lists of an album. It starts off with Never Let Me Down Again, which, if you don't know what that is, then I don't know why you're watching this review, but if not, check it out. Never Let Me Down Again, to me, has always been one of the most epic-sounding songs. From the really big ending with and especially the live version where everybody starts waving their hands back and forth. It's a really energetic song, and that's followed up by the much more slow, much more ballady The Things You Said, which I was lucky to see played live again here on the most recent tour after not being played live for 30 years. But yeah, The Things You Said is by far one of Martin's greatest songs. I love the little synth throughout it. Perfect aesthetic to the album, a perfect follow-up to Never Let Me Down Again, which is then followed by the infamous Strangelove, which is a song that I've I've always had a weird relationship with this song because some parts of me had always felt that it was a little too, it didn't always feel fit on this album, but after hearing the album version more than the single version, I gotta say, the Strangelove fits right in, and it's another good song. I already mentioned Sacred, but I want to bring up something about the album and Sacred. The beginning, a more religious-sounding chants in the beginning of Sacred is something that would kind of become a Depeche Mode staple going on into the future. These pseudo-religious themes that would be throughout, they were present before, especially on Blasphemous Rumors, but they really, really dug deep into it on Music for the Masses with the song Sacred, which is one of the highlights for me. And side one ends with the really interesting, really strange Little 15, which oddly enough was a single in France, I believe. I don't know why they did that, but I gotta say it was an interesting choice. Side 2 opens up with Behind the Wheel with the panning plate sound, which is really interesting. And some of the most underrated Depeche Mode songs, honestly, are on this second side. I Want You Now and To Have and To Hold are excellent songs. To Have and To Hold, I've always found was probably one of the darkest Depeche Mode songs, period. And Nothing afterwards. It would be great if they pulled that out live again. I love that song. And it ends with Pimp, which is one of the most creepy instrumentals I think the band has ever done. Instrumentation-wise, this album does follow through a lot of the same trends they built up on Black Celebration, but the drum sounds have a much larger feel to it. as far as I know, on Never Let Me Down Again, they sampled actual drum sounds opposed to electronic sounds, which gives it a much more bigger, much more live sounding sound. It's a weird thing to say. And throughout this, the synths they use, while they are some softer synths, a lot of them have a really good sound when played in a big arena. It's hard to stress that, but it's just true. They use the right sounds here for a live setting, and I really do love that about this album. And overall, this album was tremendously important for the band. I kind of want to talk a little bit about the whole Eastern European thing that I brought up with Black Celebration, because I do want to cover a really special concert. I think it was '88. They played a concert in East Berlin, which was one of the most well-documented Depeche Mode concerts of that time. You know, you could find interviews from that era. You could find them talking about how strange it was and how they found it kind of ominous that the people over there knew all of the lyrics of the songs, despite a lot of the governments cracking down on the distribution of their music. And Music for the Masses was probably the album that broke the biggest over there. I mean, not only does this album have that good mainstream appeal, it appealed to a lot of the people over in that side of the world, under the crushing reins of the governments over there that were restricting this. So, needless to say, I mean, this album wasn't just big over there. This was probably their first album that was universally huge. I mean, in America, it charted way better than Black Celebration did, and it was full of hits from Never Let Me Down Again, Strange Love, and Behind the Wheel. And the thing that I find interesting about the appeal of this album is that I feel like everything they had done up to this point had led up to Music for the Masses. And the name of this album kind of seems a little, kind of like a little bit ironic, a little bit joking, you know? Because the way it's said is Music for the Masses, it literally is more appealing to the masses, which I find really funny. I don't know if that was intentional or not, probably, considering these songs do have a more, like, mainstream appeal to them. But this was also their last album they would put out in the 1980s. In 1987, this would be their last release, and I gotta say, it's a good end to everything they had done so far. And it's a very 80s sounding album while still sounding relevant today, which I will always give props to any group that can make an album sound old and new at the same time. And just the relevance. You know, this album still holds up. I mean, I think that everything I said so far in this review, I mean, all leads to the fact that when they pull these songs out live, it doesn't sound like they're doing a nostalgia act. It sounds like they're playing songs that still sound fresh. And that is why I think Depeche Mode 101 is so successful. And the production on this thing is great. I really don't need to go too much into that. It's just an excellent produced album. But, I mean, I do want to talk a little bit about 101 before I wrap up this review. You know, the next review, I already did review earlier on this channel, but I'm probably going to do again. But the Pasadena Rose Bowl concert is really, I think, the moment Depeche Mode became, like, they already were, but I think they became, like, the greatest band at this point. Not only did they have a strong back catalog, they put on a killer performance, and definitely had established that underground cult audience that is present today. And a lot of that has to do with Music for the Masses. So yeah, I mean, Depeche Mode is without a doubt a cult band. They have a cult fan base, and I love that about them. And Black Celebration and Music for the Masses, to me, are the two albums that really established that, and really dug deep into that dark, but also appealing sound, which they still have today. So that's it for this review. Music for the Masses, one of the greatest albums ever recorded. That's about it for now. Depeche Mode, Music for the Masses.